Hi everyone, comic book reviewer here. This time reviewing on the Garfield movie. Now, as you know, the Garfield movie is a 2024 animated adventure comedy film that was meant to star Chris Pratt in the role of Garfield. And I think, obviously, after seeing Smarty Pants reviews on it, and after my friend and co-worker Sean showed me so many Garfield stuff, I decided to kind of get the 2024 film to do my review on it. So the premise of the film is meant to follow Garfield living his average normal life. Obviously, using John Arbuckle for his own ends, we kind of see how Odie's kind of like his own little lapdog, but still treats him fairly. But we kind of see how, obviously, when a former link to Garfield's father's past, known as Jinx, expects Garfield, Vic, who's meant to be his father, and Odie to kind of do a sort of repayment for the past heist. We do see how Garfield is hesitant to work with his father Vic, and I think the film does a good job symbolizing an important message about seeing how past relationships from a family member might cloud your judgment, but when you see the truth more clearly, you start to realize the truth behind why they were the way they are and what they did. You kind of get the sense that Vic is trying to get Garfield to see things more clearly, and you can kind of get the sense that Garfield has to kind of go through his own personal journey to understand why Vic abandoned him, why he obviously didn't come back to look for him. And I think the film does it excellent, because you kind of get the sense there is some hesitance between Garfield and Vic, and when Garfield realizes the truth, he actually finally takes off his hatred and finally now sees things in a lot more positive light. And I do think, obviously, having Hannah Waddingham to voice the main villain Jinx definitely works, because rather than seeing things from Vic's perspective or trying to understand things, she pretty much blames Vic for something that obviously she could have seen things a bit more clearly. And I think the whole point of her character is meant to be a dark foil to Garfield. It's kind of clear she treats her own henchmen more like disposable pawns, while Garfield treats Odie with a bit more compassion and care and can understand what he's trying to say. And it's kind of clear that Vic's crew did see him in a bit more of a negative light, but it becomes clear that when Garfield sees the truth, he sees it a lot more clearly. And I do think the film obviously has to keep the animation, the backgrounds, as well as the story close to what I think Garfield and Friends got right at. These kind of stories of the day, these kind of over-the-top adventures. And I think that's what made Garfield and Friends such a perfect household name. It was that show that I think everyone basically remembers. I think the problem that the Garfield show has is that it was trying to fit into a story, a tone, as well as a kind of different concept that fans of the original and the comic strip would not really get used to. And I think obviously it's clear that the Garfield movie is trying to be a different adaptation to Garfield on the Town, because I think Garfield on the Town made sense because it was meant to show Garfield reconnecting with his family, but it became clear that him and his family's past was completely different. And it was clear that even his grandfather had justified reasons for not seeing Garfield in a positive light. I think the Garfield movie is doing something similar, but it knows it has to be a little more close to what I think Garfield and Friends would have been, as well as having to go with a completely different story. And I do think Chris Pratt wasn't a bad choice for Garfield. He's obviously trying to sound close to what Lorenzo magic has to be, but sounding a bit like this smooth talking con artist, but having that kind of same Garfield spirit. And I obviously do think having Nicholas Hoult voicing John Arbuckle works, because I think he's meant to sound more like this young bachelor, still having that normal life. And it kind of becomes clear that he still wants Garfield and Odie to live this kind of normal, average bachelor life, despite him being kind of like a bit of a loser. But that was the point of John Arbuckle. He was a bit of a loser, but he always kind of had to be the voice of reason, not only to Garfield, but also to Odie when the situation got a little hectic. I think to me, the Garfield movie knows what it has to be. It has to be more like using elements from Garfield and Friends. Obviously, trying to be something completely different from the comic strip, but it becomes clear that it's trying to step away from emulating similar mistakes to the live action movies and fully adapting the animated roots of Garfield and Friends that made it more rememberable. So it definitely deserves 2 thumbs in the middles. It's an okay adaptation. It knows what it has to be. A simple family film being fun and friendly while telling a hard truth moral about seeing your family member that you might have viewed in a negative light completely differently and seeing that they had your back no matter what. So, comic book reviewer here, signing out.